Dido onto the Keynote stage for her presentation where she's going to share CEO's perspective of cybersecurity.
Thanks very much. Yeah, no prizes for guessing why I'm speaking here. I usually give this talk to chief execs or boards, and I'm extremely mindful that in this group you all know about 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more about cybersecurity than I do. So forgive me when I get all the technical details wrong. There are a number of people in the room who actually know exactly what happened at TalkTalk and can correct me when I get it wrong. But I'm going to try and give you the perspective of, I jokingly in some ways describe it as a sort of, I'm a member of Alcoholics or Cyber Anonymous. I have been through a cyber attack and I'm still here. And I'm going to try and talk you through what it felt like and what I think I learned and what the board at TalkTalk learned and what I'm trying to bring to other organisations as a result. So let's begin by just taking you back to what happened. So 2.5 years ago, October 2015, I had just come back from lunch, quite a tricky lunch with someone who needed to leave the business, was thinking, oh, that went quite well, looked at my phone, saw that there was an urgent incident call that had been set up for an ExCo critical incident. Not unusual when you're the chief executive of telco, as you will all know. So get on the call, and as is often the case in those calls, the commercial team were very keen to get the sales website back up and functioning because the tech team had taken that down, and there was the usual tension between the caution on the technology side and the sales guys wanting to get selling. We were working through what had happened, and our CTO had literally just said that he was really very concerned that some of the perimeter defences might have been breached, when I got an email into my personal inbox from an anonymous address purporting to be the hacker. And attached to that email was an attachment with customer data on it. And it was very clear, very quickly on that call, that this was now a different conversation entirely. And the debate about when the sales team could get selling stopped in a nanosecond. And we immediately switched, actually, very, very quickly, into what do we need to do to protect our customers and protect the business, and how do we get help to manage it. I mean, the hairs go up on the back of my neck even as I remember it 2.5 years ago. Within about 12 hours, it was very clear that we didn't know what had been taken, but a lot of data could have been taken. So I'll never forget the 8 o'clock in the morning next day incident call where Robin from the team from BAE is here, where the BAE team talked us through what they thought might have been taken, emphasis might. 8 o'clock in the morning, and we went through that it could be, and the numbers were scary, so could be several 100,000 credit card details. Pause, we don't know if they're encrypted. Pause. It could be 4 million customers' bank account details. It could be 30 million email addresses. At which point, after about 30 seconds, one of us said, hold on a sec, how can we have 30 million email addresses? And the answer was there are 30 million lines in the file, and we don't know how many have been accessed. So what I discovered is what you will all know, is that in the heat of an incident, the really difficult thing is you don't know. So we knew that potentially all of our customers' data had been stolen, but we didn't know exactly what had been stolen, and we knew it was going to take us a while to find out. So the reason you all know who I am is very quickly after that, as a board, we took a decision that the best thing we could do to protect our customers was to be honest about it, and was to go out and warn our customers, because as you quickly work out, being armed with somebody's bank account details actually doesn't make it particularly easy to steal from them. Every time in the old world we write a cheque or we send our bank account details for someone to pay into our account, obviously we give them our bank account details. But it's extremely easy to scam a vulnerable customer if you ring them up armed with their bank account details. So the judgment that we made as a business 24 hours after we'd been attacked was that the best way we could protect our customers was by warning them. And warning them, offering them free credit checking, making it really clear that if anyone rang them up purporting to be talked to or armed with this information, it wasn't talked to. We also concluded, because a lot of our customers were elderly, maybe less tech savvy, that we couldn't just send them an email, that the best way to reach them was through broadcast media. So we consciously went out and publicly used every media channel, both old-fashioned and modern social media, to reach our customers. And hence, I'm sort of here. Lots of people didn't want us to do that. So if you go through my timeline, it happened at lunchtime on a Wednesday. I'm now lunchtime on a Thursday. My board and we've all decided that we're going to warn all of our customers. The Metropolitan Police, as I think it's been quite widely reported, didn't want us to. At that point, they strongly advised us that they would like us to give them a few more days to try and catch the bad guys. And we spent the afternoon of that Thursday discussing with, among others, the Met's hostage negotiation team about whether or not we could get our data back. And the point at which we brainstormed, and I said, if you could promise me that there is at least a chance, a meaningful chance, that I would never have to tell anyone about this because we'll get all the data back, then we can have a conversation. To which the obvious response was, oh no, of course you're going to have to tell your customers. To which my board's view and my view, my chairman's view, was therefore we need to tell them now. Because if we tell them now, we can help them and we can protect them. And it was a strange experience to have the Met on our board decision-making call, wanting to have their view minuted that they thought was a bad idea. Now, to their great credit, as we worked through over the next few days and weeks, the Met couldn't have been more helpful and supportive. But initially, their view was, no, keep quiet for a few days. And one of the things we realised that day was that we were actually the only people whose objective function was to look after our customers. It wasn't that the Met were doing a bad job. Their objective function was to catch the crooks. GCHQ's objective function was national security. We were really the only team of people engaged in this whose objective function, because it was the best way to save our company, was to look after our customers. So we made that decision, and the regret I have is actually we made that decision too late. So because we'd spent all that afternoon and early evening debating with various people who didn't want us to go public, we went public at about 10:30 at night, which as a tip is not a very clever thing to do. Because you're creating a sense of worry and concern, and everything is all a bit too rushed and scary. We would have been much better not going later, as lots of people think I should have done, but actually going earlier. At lunchtime on the Thursday, at the point as a board we decided the right thing to do was warn our customers. If we talked honestly and openly at lunchtime with the Met on one side and what is now the National Cybersecurity Centre on the other side, saying this is how customers, you look after yourselves, and this is what TalkTalk's doing to try and right the situation, it would have been a much better place to be. But I don't regret for a moment trying to go as fast as we could. I wish we could have gone earlier. It then took us several weeks to get enough comfort to bring our systems back up, and several months before we stabilised the business completely. But the strange thing is, 3 months after the attack, TalkTalk's brand was better trusted than it was before the attack. I know this because one of the things you have to do when you are in this sort of a crisis is you have to use data. So we were polling customers' opinions of us every week from the first week of the attack. And I knew what brand trust looked like before the attack. And yes, it dipped in the first couple of weeks, but 3 months after the attack, I would recommend TalkTalk to a friend was better than it had been before the attack. And churn, the ultimate metric for any telco, the percentage of customers leaving you each month, was lower than it had been before the attack. And ultimately that's because customers thought that, and the qualitative research would have said something like this. They said they wouldn't really have trusted us beforehand, if we're honest. They weren't sure whether the attack was our fault, but they couldn't quite sort of get away from the fact that they thought we'd try to do something to look after them in the heat of a really difficult circumstance. So one of my big learnings is that when you're in these really difficult situations, as a business leader and a chief exec, it is your job to look after your customers' interests. And if you do, they do reward you. Just in the same way that we all know that whenever we have a bad service experience, if somebody looks after you and tries to recover that bad service experience, whether that's at an airport or a hotel, a shop or a bank, we're much more loyal to that brand. The same is true in cyber. And no, you wouldn't wish what happened to my business and my team, but actually, as we came out the other end, TalkTalk was a better business, better trusted, and better at managing itself. So that's what happened if you look at it externally. Let me talk to you briefly, technically, about what really happened internally and what went wrong. So we were not a company that didn't take cybersecurity seriously. At least that's what we thought. 6 months before the attack, I can remember sitting down with the team at GCHQ, doing a review as the CEO of our 10 steps to cybersecurity plan. And the conclusion from GCHQ was, look, you're a young and immature business, but I can see you're taking this seriously. These are the right things to be working on. Keep going. Now, stupidly, as the CEO, I thought, oh, good, that's okay. Now, how wrong could I be? What happened to us was that we were a young and immature business. We were a business that had grown through a lot of acquisitions, and a business that we had bought a business that had bought a business that had a legacy website that had an extremely simple SQL injection vulnerability in a legacy website that had not been used in 2 of those 3 acquisitions. We'd done all the penetration testing, we'd had the white hat hackers, we'd done what would have counted for cyber due diligence when the business was bought in 2010, and none of us had found it. We should have done, but none of us did. We were trying in that world. So my analogy is, you bought a farm, and in the far corner of one of the far fields, there's a shed covered in brambles. And when you buy the farm, all you see is the brambles in the corner. You didn't even know the shed was there. And in the back of the shed, there was a completely wide open window. And the more I talk to other chief execs who have gone through similar experiences, it is the legacy that gets you. It's acquisitions and legacy within acquisitions that gets you. And it's business leaders not really hearing from their security experts, like all of you, that they need to spend money in decommissioning the legacy, whether they acquired it or whether they built it themselves. And that's pretty much what happened to us. So what did we learn from it? The first thing we learned is that I don't think any board is really, even now, even my own old board at TalkTalk, asking the right question. The temptation is to ask a really easy question. Are we okay? Now, is the cybersecurity plan good enough? And it's a really, really easy question to answer for any organisation. The answer is no. You're not okay. None of us can give our boards 100% confidence in our security, physical or digital. And yet, and in the physical space, boards wouldn't ask that question. They wouldn't say, are we physically okay? If you were running an oil rig, as the chief exec, you wouldn't say, are we physically okay? You'd ask a different question. You'd say, what are the risks? What are the risks that I'm happy to accept? And what are the risks that I'm really worried about that we need to be pushing to mitigate? And however good your cybersecurity is, or you think it is, those are the right questions to be asking. And now when I go around organisations and I ask them, because they always ask me about cybersecurity, I say, so, how good's your cybersecurity? The teams that say, oh, it's really good, they're the ones I worry about. The teams that immediately say, well, I'm a bit worried about X, I think, well, okay, we've got to first base. But I think the vast majority of boards want to be able to abdicate responsibility by asking their security professionals, are we okay? And you mustn't let them ask that question. Or if they do, you just have to boldly, as my CTO did 3 months after the TalkTalk cyber attack, when one of our non-execs asked the question, he just said, no, we're not okay. At that point, everyone went, oh! Said, and I'm never going to tell you that we're okay. I'll tell you what I'm less worried about, I'll tell you what I think we have to live with, and I'll tell you what I'm really worried about today. And we have to share that risk as a professional board. So that's the first really big lesson that we learned. The second really big lesson that we learned is that it is really board-level work. And I know you guys will have all read all the various reports, you've probably written most of them, saying that it's a board-level issue. I learned in a completely visceral way that it's a board-level issue, because I was the CEO that had to make the board-level decisions. And the most difficult decision I had to take was not whether or not to warn our customers, was not whether to go on the Today programme for the umpteenth time to be, asked questions I couldn't answer. The most difficult decision I had to take was when it was safe enough to bring our online systems back online again for customers. So while we weren't the victims of a state actor in the original attack, after 2 weeks of sort of global media coverage, we were like this honey trap for any hacker on the planet that wanted to have fun, however young or sophisticated they might be. So the risk profile for the business had changed fundamentally. So the decisions on when it was safe enough to let our customers start checking their bills online again, to start ordering things and giving us payment details online again, that was a really, really difficult decision. And my security and technology professionals in TalkTalk wanted to take that decision themselves, and they couldn't. They kept saying to me, I sort of jokingly described them as Scotty from the Starship Enterprise, kept asking for a few more hours, Captain, give me a bit more time. And I kept saying, I can't let you make that choice. I need to know what risks I'm taking if we bring the systems back online. And I remember a very fraught debate on Saturday night, 2 weeks in, with the CTO and the CISO. And I said, I need to know, if I'm a complete lunatic, and I recommend to the board that on Monday we open up online sales and online service again, what happens? And they went into complete freefall. I said, I need you to articulate to me what are the risks that we would be running if we did that. So after they calmed down, they talked me through that. And I said, so I'm not a complete idiot. What if I give you another 2 weeks? Which of those risks that you've just told me about have gone away if you have another 2 weeks to put in extra layers of security in each different part of the system? And they talked me through that. And they were still really unhappy. I said, okay, what if you had, say, 8 weeks? That's what you're saying you need. And then they started to calm down and listen. I said, well, that's lovely. The problem is, in 8 weeks, the company's dead anyway. In 8 weeks, the lines between cyber risk and business risk have crossed. And actually, although you think this is the only thing that matters, it isn't the only thing that matters to me. I've got to also mitigate the fact that customers are leaving it, that we can't sell anything, that customers can't check their bill. There's a point at which the cyber risk is actually lower than the other business risk. And I need to understand the cyber risk enough to be able to make that judgment and make that recommendation to the board. And that's the point when I really realised that cyber is a board decision. And I think it's also where my third learning, I realised that really, really smart engineers can speak English. It requires extreme pressure sometimes, but they can. And also, sort of ordinary general managers, PPEs from Oxford like me, who are not technically trained, can understand really great engineers when they absolutely have to. And we learned as a team in TalkTalk that that's magic. That's actually something that's really brilliant. When your engineers are willing to explain what they do in language that your non-engineers can understand, and your non-engineers want to lean into the technical issues and really engage in it, actually that's when you do brilliant product development. That's the magic of tech companies. And in TalkTalk, we actually learned that through the cyber attack. Now, you could say we absolutely should have learned it before, but we learned it because we absolutely had to. I had to be able to explain on national media what was happening, and I had to be able to make those trade-offs on when it was safe enough to bring different services up and running. And it completely transformed the way TalkTalk worked as a company, thoroughly for the good. So that's a huge learning. And I think the key to all of this, really, is I think that you have to find a way of showing your non-techie business leaders that their customer aspirations are better met by them engaging in the technology and security issues. And they should do that in exactly the same way that they engage in other parts of the business that they don't know. Because when you're a CEO, you by definition haven't done all the jobs in the company. You simply couldn't have been. And so you're always leading and managing people who do things that you don't understand. That's a normal part of being a CEO. And all CEOs learn how to sort of get out of the helicopter and get right down deep into the mine to learn about parts of the organisation that is not their natural place or their training ground. The danger, I think, we have with cybersecurity is that it's become a sort of taboo. It's one of the reasons why I do these sorts of speeches. I'm a very rare beast, a chief executive who led a company through a cyber attack, which I openly admit that we could have done more to protect ourselves from, and I'm willing to talk about it. And the reason I'm willing to talk about it is if we make it a taboo, the bad guys win. And I really firmly believe that the digital world is a great thing for society, but only if we look at how we civilise it. We can't make it completely safe, but we can make it civilised. So, for example, in the physical world, it was only after it became mandatory to report health and safety incidents or that you started to see health and safety on oil rigs improve. And that only happened after the Piper Alpha disaster. It took an awful disaster for the industry to acknowledge that transparency would actually drive better safety. I think exactly the same is true of cybersecurity. It is so easy for companies to convince themselves that they don't really need to tell anyone about this. I think actually GDPR is a good thing. It's going to force much greater transparency. I think it could go much further. And until we do, you won't see generalists like me treating cyber risk in the same way they treat physical risk, where everything has to be out in the open. And that's the way that we will drive change. So I want to make sure that we've got enough time for questions. My final thought would be, there is a real danger that to add to the taboo, cybersecurity is seen as a sort of cloak and dagger, scary, negative thing. I think we have to be very careful. We are the generation that is building the scaffolding, if you like, for the digital world, the moral, the social, and the legal scaffolding to make a civilized digital space. You guys are the professional experts that, in the cyber space, will guide society through that. And we mustn't make it so terrifying that we encourage people to do what happened at the same point in the Industrial Revolution. People walking in front of cars waving white flags saying danger. That's not the right answer. What instead we've got to do is engage as a society in the right debate to create the rules and regulations, the highway code, the equivalent of the tech innovation that sparks the creation of the equivalent of the airbag and the seatbelt. And then the training programs and the education like the Green Cross Code. All of those things need to happen in multiple spaces in the digital world, and cybersecurity is one of them. There's no doubt it makes for a really exciting career, and I expect all of you have got hugely fascinating jobs ahead of you. But I think you also have an important responsibility to help generalists like me understand it, not make it so scary or so secret that people are afraid of their shadow, and instead help us all treat it in exactly the same way we should treat other risks, which is the one to be acknowledged and to be managed and mitigated. So, with that, I'm very happy to take any questions at all. I'm hoping someone's got a mic. Brilliant.
Good morning, John Raven from the Register, Online IT News Service. TalkTalk was fined a record 400,000 by the ICO, and I quote directly from what they said about the incidents. TalkTalk's Information Commissioner Elizabeth Denham said, TalkTalk's failure to implement the most basic cybersecurity measures allowed hackers to penetrate TalkTalk systems with ease. My question for you is, would, in your opinion, TalkTalk have survived as a business had GDPR been in place?
Gosh, you take me back in time. I think that if you also read from the other things that the Information Commissioner said, they praised the fact that we try to look after customers. And I can't predict how the ICO will react. One of the things I have said many times since the cyber attack, as I've just said today, I think the GDPR is a thoroughly good thing. If anything, I don't think it is tight enough. I think there are arguably too many loopholes still that enable companies to find a way not to have to report that they've been attacked. Whereas for TalkTalk as a telco, we always had to report even without the GDPR. So I don't think it's for me to determine what the ICO will do in their new world. I think it's entirely appropriate that they've upped the ante. And as I said, I've actually campaigned with the ICO to do that. Where next? There's a hand up here, and I've had a look at the screen as well.
Hello, Ben Heather from Health Service Journal. Obviously, the NHS has had its own cyber moment of reckoning, and you're on that side of the fence now. What's your view, given your own experience and business, of the cyber readiness and cyber resilience of the NHS currently?
Well, the NHS is 10% of the UK economy, and therefore it's a fairly safe bet that you're going to find a cross-section of readiness. And so the points I've made around, are we asking the right question? I ask as I visit trusts, how good is your cybersecurity? Some of them say to me, it's really good, and I worry. Some of them say, I'm really worried about this, and I immediately think, okay, you're thinking about it. So everyone is on a journey. And I think one of the dangers, these are the two questions you've just asked. If we're not careful, we demonise this rather than treat it really seriously and help people work out how to do this better. So I think trying to sort of find the trust that's not doing it perfectly is the wrong way to do this, as with all things actually. Sharing best practice, finding people getting it right, recognising that and helping people learn from that is the way that you spread the level up in the way that you need to. I would say, maybe this is a small gift that TalkTalk gave to the country. When the TalkTalk hack happened, there was no National Cybersecurity Centre. So one of the things that was most difficult for us was trying to navigate the different government agencies to work through who we needed to be reporting to, who was there to help us and who wasn't. When WannaCry happened last year, what you had was the National Cybersecurity Centre absolutely there, up front and centre, side by side with the NHS team. And I think what they did as a result is that they managed outcomes for citizens and patients much better. There wasn't the same sort of scaremongering that I think we saw in earlier attacks. You had useful information for people whose urgent procedures might be affected actually reaching them. And so the way that we all work together to mitigate that, that doesn't take away any ultimate responsibility for organisations that may not have protected themselves appropriately. But it does mean that the people expecting services were better treated and handled through that. And I think that actually the NHS and the National Cybersecurity team did that very well last year. Right at the back.
Cameron Young, Aviva. Baroness Hardy, in your presentation you mentioned that it was still very hard for cybersecurity professionals to engage with boards and the C-suite regarding legacy or vulnerabilities associated to legacy infrastructure. Coming from a CE's perspective that saw messaging pre and post a catastrophic cyber attack, how would you recommend that cybersecurity professionals approach the board with these kind of vulnerabilities and how we can work with the C-suite to gain funding to replace them?
I think a couple of things. I think the first thing is that you have to speak truth to power. One of the things, and forgive me for caricaturing, but as a caricature, people working in most technology functions are likely to be more on the introverted than the extroverted spectrum, and just simply because of their strengths, not their weaknesses. And often they find it hard in conflict situations to really challenge back. And one of the things that boards need to do is learn to listen to those introverted experts, but those introverted experts also need to gather their courage to speak truth to power. So being really honest about what the risks are if you are forced to deliver within the budget that you're being set. Being really honest that you can't fill vacancies in your security team, rather than being heroic and saying, it's okay, I can get everything done. And I think it's very tempting for boards the standard budget process of looking at how to shrink things, not to ask those questions, whereas I encourage boards now to ask, how many vacancies have you got in your security team? What, if they were given a blank sheet of paper, would your security team want as their budget and why? Do you really know that? Or has it already been chipped 3 or 4 times in the budget process before it's even arrived at the board? So I think both sides in that conversation have a responsibility to hear each other properly, to reach the right balanced business judgment. So be brave and honest, rather than hide and be heroic. Come right down here.
Hi, Sean Weston from Reed Specialist Recruitment. You're just talking about budgets. What was your budget for cybersecurity 12 months before the incident, and what was it 12 months after?
A, TalkTalk has never published that level of detail, but B, I left a year ago, and I definitely can't remember the number now. So what I can say is we did have vacancies in the security team. The budget did go up really significantly after the event, and I've said several times from the very beginning, of course we could have done more. Would that have prevented the attack? I don't know. Do I wish we'd spent more money? Yes, of course I do. But actually, we learned something much more important than how much money do you spend. We learned how, as an organisation, we develop product better by this magic of technology folk working better with commercial folk. So I think it's a mistake to go just straight to the headline of how much money. I think you also need to think about the culture. And PwC did some great work for us. They did an independent review for the board on what had happened, what could we have done differently, what could we learn from it. And they coined a great phrase about the culture of TalkTalk, that TalkTalk was fundamentally a pioneering culture. And they said really successful tech companies need to have a mixture of settlers and pioneers. And there's problems with both sides of the types of culture. So TalkTalk as a pioneering culture, we were actually really pretty good at managing the incident and reacting to that world where you don't know what's going on and trying to help our customers through it. But were we really rigorous and organised? Had we done a full rehearsal for cyber? No, we were a young, entrepreneurial, pioneering company, and we needed to acquire some more settler skills. If you look at other very big organisations that have gone through cyber attacks that are more settler, they've been good at some of the things we were less good at, but really fallen down in how they've engaged and communicated during the crisis, and that's been just as damaging. So the big learning for TalkTalk, yes, more money, more people, different skills, but really more fundamentally a better blend in the way the company worked between pioneer and settler and between technical expert and commercial product developer. There's some people that, do you want me to do from here? So, as a CEO, what are the cybersecurity metrics you want to see regularly reported? Ooh, that's a good question. We worked, again, the irony of this is that the first detailed meeting I had on TalkTalk's board-level security dashboard was the morning before the cyber attack. As we worked, so as I say, it wasn't that we weren't looking at this. I think that you've got to look at both input and output measures. And I think that there's a danger that if you're too reliant just on the dashboard as the CEO, you miss the qualitative sense as well. So while I would have a dashboard, actually I think the most important thing a CEO could do to manage their cybersecurity better is to spend some time one-on-one with the brightest, youngest stars in their security function, getting them to talk them through what they're most worried about. And that will do you much more good as a CEO to be able to read and understand the metrics. Of course you want to be able to look at, understanding, attacks, breaches. You want to understand what your legacy footprint looks like. You want to understand where you are on patch upgrades. You want to understand your joiners, movers and leavers processes. I know I'm not saying anything you guys don't already know, but actually as a CEO, I think you need to make it real by building a relationship low down in the organisation with the people who can tell you what they're most scared about. Do you want me to take another one from here? And then maybe a few more from the audience? I've answered, or rather not answered, sorry, the size of the security team and the budget. How did the actual impact measure against how you positioned your cyber risk? That's a very good question. The impact was enormous, clearly, reputationally and financially. It was already sitting there, as it should, as a very high cost likely issue. As I say, it wasn't that we didn't think that this was an issue. It would be an easy tale to tell if we thought that was the case. Do I think that we were taking cybersecurity seriously enough before the incident? No. Would I do more if I was in that position again? Yes. Do I know that that would have prevented it? No, I don't, if I'm really honest either. I don't think there are nice, easy answers to this. Which is why, as I say, I think the actual magic is around the interaction in the teams, rather than being able to say, here's my board report that shows I'm taking this seriously. I'll take one more from here and then some from the audience. There's one about... I'd like to take the, how do you think the messages you gave your customers helped to protect them when you went public, and can you tell us how? So I haven't really talked about that. So, as I say, our biggest concern as a telco was not actually that armed with your bank account details, a hacker could steal money from your bank account, despite what the front page at the time said. That was quite unlikely. Our biggest worry was that armed with your bank account details, one of the very many scam operations would be randomly calling households and randomly catch upon TalkTalk customers and be able to con them into believing that was a TalkTalk person on the phone because they had more data and real data, bank account details, etc. And we felt that if we warned our customers that we might have lost this data, and in warning them we gave them free credit checking, that we stood a better chance of protecting those most vulnerable customers. And I stand by that. I think that was the right thing to do. I think if we hadn't done that, well, firstly, we'd have had to have found a reason why our website wasn't up and running for about 3 weeks, which as an online-driven telco would have been quite hard to do, truthfully. I think it's just inconceivable that we could have kept doing that. And secondly, we would have known that we could have helped our customers. So the biggest risk that you face if someone's got your banking details is that they impersonate you and take out a loan in your name and ruin your credit rating. So free credit checking can make a real difference. And we offered free credit checking to all of our customers. The other thing that we did, as we got the online systems back up and running, we did something else that sort of the lawyers initially thought was a bad idea, which was we offered all of our customers, whether they'd been affected or not, because in the end it turned out that actually a relatively small number of our customers had been affected, we offered all of our customers an opportunity to have a free upgrade without any terms and conditions. So you could simply take something free from TalkTalk, and it would fall away at the end of the period. It was free, there were no catches, you were not going to be charged anything as a result. And while only I say, roughly 150,000 of our customers were directly affected by the attack, 500,000 people took up the free upgrade. And the majority of the customer base thought it was a really good gesture to have made. And that again goes against a lot of the considered wisdom. And I think that the biggest risk companies face in cyber is reputational risk. Reputational risk that you don't look after your customers when there's a problem. And so the reason why I think the way we behaved worked, and the reason why TalkTalk is growing faster today than it has ever done, and has got lower churn than it has ever done, is because in that really difficult period, we learned what it means to look after your customers. And if you do what's right for your customers in a really difficult situation, they do reward you in the end. And so that's why I really firmly believe that what we did was right. Okay, I'm getting a 10-minute warning, so I'll go back to the room. Is that the mic with somebody?
Darren Blumenthal, Accenture Ecosystem Adventures. Did you continue to communicate with the hacker, and if so, what was that like?
That was the point at which I thought I'd moved from the real world into spooks or Spectre. We continued to receive various messages, I did, from the hacker, and there was much debate about what to do about that. None of that's in the public domain, so I don't think I should really talk about it, not least because I'm long gone from TalkTalk now. But it was one of the areas where, as a chief executive, you are not prepared for entering that world. Now, as a telco chief executive, at least I had security clearance. I'd met the team from GCHQ. I knew, as I said, I knew a little bit about this. But even I wasn't really prepared to be in a world where you're starting. The bit that's properly terrifying for the chief executive in this situation is you don't know who's attacking you. If you run a physical business and burglars rampage your shop, you sort of know that it's not the Russians who've arrived. When you're a victim of a cyber attack, you don't know whether it's Russia, North Korea, or, as it turned out with us, some teenage hackers. You don't know whether it's digital or whether it could be physical as well. So the most terrifying thing for me was about 4 days in, where the whole world had gone sort of mad, and we started to worry that it might be a very angry customer and that it could get physical as well as digital. And I picked up the phone to the team at GCHQ who were helping us one night and said, look, I'm probably being really silly, but can you just tell me whether or not I should be worried about my family's safety? Now, I thought, part of me thought, this is silly, I feel like I'm in Spooks. That's because this is what happens next in the Spooks episode, it's not real. And they'll just say, don't be silly, Dido. When the person at the end of the phone said, I don't know enough about the case, give me 40 minutes, I will go and properly investigate before I give you an answer, that is the most terrifying 40 minutes I have had in my life. Because they took my question really seriously. Now, they came back 40 minutes later and gave me tremendous reassurance that they thought it was. They said, I can't tell you anything, and nor should I, but I don't think you should worry about your family. So that was actually very scary, and I needed to manage that at the same time as leading my people through change. I don't think I've ever told an audience that story, actually, of this scale. But for me, that was when I felt like I moved briefly into Spooks, and then realised that I wasn't in Spooks. And it's where, as a business, we started to use data and expert advice much, much more seriously, because we realised we couldn't trust our instincts. Our instincts were based on having watched the movies. And do you know what? It made us a better business. So we did more data tracking, we listened better to our real experts, we did much more customer research because we couldn't trust our gut as leaders. Our past experience didn't help us. And as a result, I think the business is better for having learned that actually, use the analysis, trust the data, listen to the technical experts, because that's all you've got in that sort of a crisis. Any more? There's one now and one now. I can take one from the screen quickly. There's a couple of questions about CISOs. I'll take the two here, I think, in terms of how did the incident affect the role of the CISO, and with hindsight, what skills would you look now for in our CISO? So our CISO at the time was a chap called Nick Kelly, who's one of the founders of TalkTalk. Nick still works with TalkTalk, I think. I left a bit of time ago. Nick is brilliant and has played an integral role in TalkTalk's creation. But we also recognised that as the business was getting bigger and more sophisticated, we needed him to focus on innovation, which is what he's most brilliant at, and we brought in a CISO, Derek Chang, who had led an organisation through a post-attack recovery. And so probably the biggest skill set, in fact I was talking to a CISO earlier today, that we needed was someone who had been through that recovery phase that we had not experienced before, and that was hugely valuable. I'm sure continues to be hugely valuable. And I think that's true in all functions, actually. You want to make sure that you've got the skill set for the situation you're in. But I hope you'll be pleased to hear that, that the attack wasn't Nick's fault. It wasn't one individual's fault. And so, we recognise the great contribution he made to the organisation and continued to. And I think that's an important thing. That's what I mean about this is a broad level issue. It's not one individual. Every individual plays their part, but it would be entirely wrong to try and point the finger at one person as a result of it. One more question from the room.
Hi, based on your experience, you have a lot of invaluable advice to give to companies and boards. What advice would you give to cybersecurity vendors and security providers, given what you've experienced?
I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record. I think it's really important that you speak in English and that you help your customers understand what their real risks and issues are. Because I think there's a huge danger that businesses just throw lots of stuff at the wall and hope it sticks. And that's not great management of anything, least of all something highly technical. So I think investing time in making sure that that you're not just selling a bit of kit, because the worst form of security sales I've seen is organisations buy something and they don't even actually use it. And as I've just described, I think that generally the difficult decisions are business decisions. So if the business owners don't understand what you're purveying, the danger is that actually your product won't be used in the way that it should be, and that in the end will be bad business for you. Okay. Try it, I'm afraid. Am I allowed to take any more questions, or do you want me to finish? One more question. Hand up in the middle here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for your honest and open experience about the talk. My name is Kobe and I am one of those CISOs. Where do you think the CISO needs to be placed in the organization? On the operational board, responding or responsible to the CTO, or a legal team, or a PR team, or marketing team even, maybe?
It's a very good question. As a general rule in business, I don't think structure on its own ever solves very much. You know, the temptation for human beings is that we've got a problem and we want to restructure. Whereas actually it's the combination of a structure with the right people in it for the right moment, with the right other incentives around it that make a difference. So the danger of generalising on I don't think there is one right place. I can tell you what we did. In the heat of the attack of the first couple of weeks, I made what I called battlefield appointments, where if I'm honest, I took some people decisions that I probably should have taken before, that would have ruffled feathers in peacetime conditions, but because we were under so much pressure, people accepted. And so one of them was to pull the CISO out from the CTO and report directly to one of the executive directors on the board, to create some tension between security and technology. I don't actually know whether that's how TalkTalk is still structured. I'm long gone. But for that time, we needed that independence. And one of the things I think we acknowledged was that actually our security team probably haven't been as brave as they should have been. And as a general managers, we haven't listened well enough either. And we needed to create shorter lines of communication up to the board and a separation from the technology function so you could get some challenge either way. But that was a very specific situation, and I think you have to view what's your situation, what are the individuals you've got, what's the company culture you've got, rather than thinking that structure on its own solves the problem. Okay? I think I'll take one more question unless they tell me to shut up and disconnect my mic. It's this chap in the middle here.
Thank you. How would you change your prioritisation of cost-benefit analysis from then to now and secure the appropriate budget you needed to probably do the auditing, the management and the oversight of the whole older network as well as the new stuff? Second part, the Hawaii HG633 on the TalkTalk network at the moment, I think it's appalling personally. But I'd like to know what advice you would give to the TalkTalk people about release notes, software management, patching, all of the things that people here would be talking about. And lastly, what would you say to Visa?
Well, look, the second question I'm not going to answer because I left TalkTalk a year ago. I'm very fond of the business and very fond of the people who run it, and the last thing you want is your mum talking about things once you've grown up and fed the nest. So I won't answer that. Your first question, a more serious question maybe. I think that the thing we've all got to do is be able to make the case for why legacy needs to be tackled. And this is no different to sort of maintenance costs in physical environments. If you were the person responsible for maintenance in the oil rig industry 30 years ago, you were grappling with exactly the same debate, when maintaining your kit so that it didn't kill people was actually the most important thing the organisation needed to do. I think the same is true, forgive the analogy, in cyber. What we've got to do is help businesses and boards understand that there might not be a revenue benefit from sorting out and decommissioning your legacy systems, but actually you mitigate an enormous risk, and it's a really important and, your business will work better for your customers if you take out a chunk of the spaghetti in the string that is holding your old business together. It's incredibly hard to do. It's one of the reasons why new entrants and young businesses actually have quite a competitive advantage in this modern world, because they don't have that legacy. But that legacy builds very quickly. TalkTalk's much the youngest telco, and boy, have we got plenty of legacy. So I think you have to make that case, and you have to make that case in a way that captures, actually going back to your point about the marketing director. You've got to explain why it's good for customers. If you only explain it in a sort of bad news way, it's much harder for the board to hear. And I think that's true across the board. And it is doable, and actually, the right, this is mine and other organisations' gift to the world. I always said 6 months after the TalkTalk cyber attack, my gift was to every board a 45-minute session on cybersecurity at every board meeting. But use it. Use it as an opportunity to set out. If we don't do this, although you might think it's a small probability, it's a very big problem. And there are bigger benefits for the business in cleaning up that legacy. Likewise, the other big piece around good housekeeping. We all know networks particularly are very, very hard to manage because it's hard to diagnose where the issues are. The simpler the network, the easier it is to manage. So that never-ending drive to simplify your technology stack is something that usually ends up in much better customer experience as well as easier to secure. People are starting to leave, so I think I should finish. Thank you very much for your great presentation.